Deep within the marble halls of Astoria Palace, where golden chandeliers cast dancing shadows on centuries-old portraits, a secret lay buried that could topple the most powerful monarchy in Europe. It wasn't just any secret. It was the kind that made kings lose sleep and queens weep in the darkness of their chambers. For 30 years, this truth had been locked away, protected by loyal servants, hidden documents, and a conspiracy of silence that reached the highest levels of the royal court. But secrets, like spring flowers pushing through winter soil, have a way of breaking free when you least expect them. The kingdom of Astoria had always been a beacon of tradition and elegance. Nestled between the rolling hills of the north and the azure coastline of the south, it was a place where fairy tales seemed to come alive. The royal family, led by the beloved Queen Isabella and her husband King Alexander, had ruled with wisdom and grace for over 4 decades. Their subjects adored them, foreign dignitaries respected them, and the world watched their every move with fascination. But on this particular autumn morning, as golden leaves danced outside the palace windows and the first frost painted delicate patterns on the glass, everything was about to change. The arrival of a single letter, sealed with unfamiliar wax and bearing no royal crest, would set in motion events that would shake the very foundations of the crown. Lady Catherine Blackwood stood at the towering windows of the royal library, her fingers tracing the condensation that had formed on the cold glass. At 35, she carried herself with the poise expected of someone who had served as the Queen's private secretary for over a decade. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, and her navy blue dress spoke of understated sophistication. But today, there was something different about Catherine. A tension in her shoulders, a distant look in her usually sharp green eyes. She had been the Queen's confidant through countless state dinners, diplomatic crises, and family celebrations. Catherine knew the Queen's preferences better than anyone, how she liked her morning tea prepared, which charitable causes touched her heart most deeply, and even the way she tapped her fingers when she was nervous. In many ways, Catherine had become more than just an employee. She was trusted family. The library around her was a testament to centuries of royal scholarship. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held first-edition volumes, ancient manuscripts, and leather-bound journals that chronicled the kingdom's rich history. The smell of aged paper and polished wood created an atmosphere of timeless wisdom. Persian rugs covered the marble floors, and comfortable reading chairs were strategically placed near tall windows that offered breathtaking views of the palace gardens. It was in this sanctuary of knowledge that Catherine had made her discovery 3 days ago. While researching historical precedents for an upcoming state ceremony, she had stumbled upon a leather portfolio hidden behind a row of genealogy books. The portfolio, covered in decades of dust, contained documents that made her blood run cold. Letters, photographs, legal papers. Evidence of something that challenged everything she thought she knew about the royal family she served so devotedly. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long rectangles of light across the library floor. Catherine glanced at her watch, a delicate piece of jewelry that had been a gift from Queen Isabella on her 5th anniversary of service. In 20 minutes, she would need to brief the Queen on the day's schedule. But how could she stand before the woman she admired and pretend that nothing had changed? A soft knock at the library door interrupted her troubled thoughts. "Enter," Catherine called, quickly stepping away from the window and smoothing down her dress. James Whitfield, the Queen's chief bodyguard, stepped into the room. At 42, James was a man who commanded respect without saying a word. His military background was evident in his straight posture and alert eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his surroundings. He had protected the royal family for 15 years, and his loyalty was absolute. Today, however, Catherine noticed something unusual in his typically stoic expression: concern. "Lady Blackwood," James said, his voice carrying the formal tone he always used in official settings. "Her Majesty requests your presence in the blue drawing room. She says it's urgent." Catherine nodded, gathering the morning's correspondence from her desk. As she moved toward the door, James fell into step beside her. They walked through the palace corridors in comfortable silence, past oil paintings of long-dead monarchs and beneath crystal chandeliers that had witnessed centuries of royal secrets. The blue drawing room was Queen Isabella's favorite space for private meetings. The walls were adorned with silk wallpaper in a soothing shade of periwinkle blue, and French windows opened onto a private terrace overlooking the rose gardens. Antique furniture upholstered in complementary fabrics created intimate seating areas, while fresh flowers, always white roses, perfumed the air with their delicate fragrance. Queen Isabella stood near the fireplace, her silver hair styled in the elegant waves that had become her signature look. At 68, she remained a striking figure, with kind blue eyes and a smile that could put anyone at ease. She wore a cream-colored dress suit that emphasized her regal bearing, and the sapphire brooch pinned to her lapel caught the morning light. "Catherine, my dear," the Queen said, extending her hands in greeting. "Please, sit with me. We need to discuss something rather important." As Catherine settled into one of the blue velvet chairs, she noticed that the Queen's usual warmth seemed strained. There was something guarded about her expression, as if she were carefully choosing her words before speaking. "I've received some troubling news," Queen Isabella began, her voice measured and calm despite the weight of her words. "It seems that certain historical matters may soon come to light, matters that could affect our family in ways I had hoped we would never have to address." Catherine's heart began to race. Could the Queen somehow know about her discovery? Had someone else found evidence of the same secret? She maintained her composure, but inside, her mind was spinning with possibilities. "Your Majesty," Catherine said carefully, "is there anything specific I can help you with? Any research or documentation you need me to prepare?" The Queen studied Catherine's face for a long moment, as if searching for something in her expression. "Catherine, you've been with our family for many years. Your discretion and loyalty have been invaluable. What I'm about to share with you must never leave this room. Do I have your word?" "Of course, Your Majesty. You have my complete confidence." Queen Isabella moved to her desk and retrieved a cream-colored envelope. The paper was expensive, the kind used for formal correspondence between royal houses. But this letter bore no official seals or crests, just elegant handwriting that seemed both familiar and foreign. "This arrived yesterday evening," the Queen explained, handing the envelope to Catherine. "It's from someone I haven't heard from in over 30 years, someone I had hoped never to hear from again." Catherine opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of matching stationery, covered in the same elegant handwriting. As she read the contents, her face grew pale. The letter was brief but devastating in its implications. It spoke of long-buried truths, of promises broken and secrets kept. The writer claimed to possess documentation that would reveal a scandal from the early days of Queen Isabella's marriage, something that could cast doubt on the legitimacy of the royal succession itself.
"Your Majesty," Catherine whispered, looking up from the letter.
This person is threatening to expose something. But what could they possibly know that would be so damaging? Queen Isabella returned to her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 68 years. The mask of royal composure slipped slightly, revealing a woman who carried the weight of decades-old guilt. "Catherine, there are things about the early years of my marriage that I've never told anyone. Things that seemed unimportant at the time, but that could be misinterpreted if they were to become public knowledge." Before Catherine could respond, James Whitfield appeared in the doorway. "Excuse me, Your Majesty, but Prince Edward has arrived. He says he needs to speak with you immediately about a family matter." Prince Edward, the Queen's younger son, strode into the room with the kind of urgency that immediately set everyone on edge. At 38, Edward was known for his quick temper and impulsive nature, qualities that often put him at odds with the more measured approach favored by the rest of the royal family. "Mother," Edward said, barely acknowledging Catherine's presence, "we have a serious problem. I've just received a call from Marcus Reynolds at the Herald Tribune. He says they're planning to run a story about our family's past, something about documents that have recently come to light." The Queen's face went ashen. Catherine felt her stomach drop as she realized that the secret she had discovered was apparently not as well hidden as she had hoped. Multiple people seemed to be converging on the same devastating truth. "What kind of documents?" the Queen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "He wouldn't say specifically, but he mentioned something about the early 90s, about decisions that were made regarding succession and legitimacy." Catherine's mind raced back to the portfolio she had found. The documents dated from exactly that time period, 1992 and 1993, letters between Queen Isabella and a man whose name she didn't recognize. Legal papers that seemed to suggest some kind of arrangement or agreement. Photographs that showed the Queen in what appeared to be secret meetings. "How long do we have?" Queen Isabella asked. Reynolds said they're planning to publish next week. He wanted to give us a chance to comment or provide our side of the story. The room fell silent except for the steady ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece. Catherine could see the Queen's mind working, calculating options and consequences. This was the woman who had navigated diplomatic crises and constitutional challenges with grace and wisdom. But this threat was different. It was personal. It was from the past. And it struck at the very heart of everything she had built. "Catherine," the Queen said finally, "I need you to begin gathering all documents related to the period between 1990 and 1995. Everything. Correspondence, official records, personal papers. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." "Of course, Your Majesty." "And Catherine, I need to tell you something that I've never told anyone else. Something that I've carried with me for 30 years. Edward moved closer to his mother, his expression shifting from anger to concern. Even James, standing silently by the door, seemed to lean in slightly. In 1992, the Queen began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. "I made a decision that I believed was in the best interests of our kingdom and our family, but it was a decision that required certain arrangements that were not entirely conventional." Catherine held her breath, waiting for the revelation that she somehow knew would change everything. "I had to make a choice between following protocol and protecting someone I loved. I chose love, but that choice came with consequences that I'm only now beginning to understand." The Queen paused, looking out toward the gardens where she had walked as a young bride, full of hope and innocence. When she continued, her words carried the weight of 3 decades of secrecy. "What I'm about to tell you could destroy our family's reputation. It could call into question the very legitimacy of our rule. But if we're going to face this crisis together, you need to know the truth." Outside, the autumn wind picked up, rattling the windows and sending leaves swirling across the palace grounds. Inside the blue drawing room, 3 people waited to hear a secret that had been 30 years in the making. A secret that would test their loyalty, challenge their understanding of duty, and force them to choose between protecting the crown and revealing the truth. Catherine thought about the documents hidden in her apartment, about the photographs that showed a younger Queen Isabella in circumstances that seemed to contradict everything the public believed about the royal family's past. She thought about the letter that had arrived yesterday, threatening to expose secrets that someone clearly knew all too well. And as Queen Isabella prepared to speak the words that would shatter their carefully constructed world, Catherine realized that she was about to become part of a conspiracy that would either save the monarchy or destroy it completely. The clock on the mantelpiece chimed 10 times, marking not just the hour, but the moment when everything changed. Whatever Queen Isabella was about to reveal, Catherine knew that there would be no going back. The secret that had been buried for 30 years was about to emerge, and with it would come consequences that none of them could fully predict. In the distance, church bells began to ring across the capital city, calling the faithful to morning services where they would pray for their beloved royal family. If only they knew that at that very moment, in a blue-walled room overlooking the palace gardens, their queen was preparing to reveal a truth that could shake their faith in everything they believed about the crown they served and the monarchy they revered. The secret was about to be unleashed, and there would be no containing its power once it was free. Queen Isabella walked to the window, her hands clasped behind her back as she gazed out at the gardens where she had once walked as a young woman. The silence in the room was heavy with anticipation, broken only by the distant sound of gardeners working among the rose bushes. "In 1991, she began, her voice carrying across the room with the measured cadence of someone who had rehearsed these words in her mind countless times over the decades. "I fell in love with someone I shouldn't have, someone whose very existence threatened everything our family represented." Catherine felt her heart skip a beat. The documents she had discovered suddenly took on new meaning. The secret meetings, the legal papers, the photographs that had seemed so mysterious just days ago. "His name was Alessandro Moretti," the Queen continued, turning back to face the room. He was an Italian diplomat, assigned to our court as a cultural attaché. He was intelligent, charming, and completely unsuitable for a woman in my position. Prince Edward shifted uncomfortably in his chair. This was clearly not what he had expected to hear. Mother, surely a romantic indiscretion from decades ago, can't be what's threatening us now. The press has speculated about various relationships over the years. This wasn't just an indiscretion, Edward. Queen Isabella interrupted, her voice sharp enough to cut through her son's assumptions. Alessandro and we had a child. The words hung in the air like a physical presence, transforming the elegant drawing room into a confessional where 30 years of carefully guarded truth finally found its voice. Catherine felt the blood drain from her face as the full magnitude of the Queen's revelation hit her. "A child?" Edward whispered, his usual composure completely shattered. "Your father knew, of course." Alexander was remarkably understanding about the situation. "We had been married for 5 years, and I had not yet conceived. The pressure from Parliament, from the people, from tradition itself, it was overwhelming. When I discovered I was carrying Alessandro's child, I thought my world would end." Queen Isabella moved to her desk and opened a locked drawer, retrieving a small leather journal that looked as though it had been handled countless times over the years. "But Alexander surprised me," he said. "That our marriage was stronger than any mistake, and that this child, regardless of his biological father, would be our child. He would be raised as a prince of Astoria, and the secret would die with us." Catherine's mind raced as she tried to process this information. "Your Majesty, are you saying that one of your sons—" "Prince Marcus," the Queen said quietly. "My eldest son and heir to the throne. He is not Alexander's biological child." The room fell into a silence so complete that Catherine could hear her own heartbeat. Prince Marcus, the crown prince who would one day rule Astoria, was not the legitimate heir according to bloodline succession. The implications were staggering. "How is this possible?" Edward demanded, his voice rising with each word. "How could you keep this secret for so long? What about the birth certificates, the official records?" "Your father and I were very careful," Queen Isabella replied. "We announced the pregnancy at a time when it would be plausible that Alexander was the father. The royal physicians were trusted allies who understood the importance of discretion. The official records show exactly what they need to show." Catherine finally found her voice. "Your Majesty, the documents I've been reviewing, were some of them related to this situation?" The Queen nodded gravely. "Alessandro returned to Italy shortly after Marcus was born. He understood that any contact with us would be dangerous for everyone involved. But we maintained correspondence for several years. He wanted to know about his son, and I felt I owed him that much." "And now someone knows about these letters?" James asked, speaking for the first time since the conversation began. "It appears so. The letter I received yesterday was from Alessandro's daughter, his legitimate daughter, born several years after Marcus. Her name is Sophia Moretti, and she's threatening to reveal everything unless we meet certain conditions." Edward stood abruptly, beginning to pace the room with the agitated energy of a caged animal. "What kind of conditions? What could she possibly want from us?" Queen Isabella opened the threatening letter again, her eyes scanning the elegant handwriting that demanded recognition, acknowledgement, and compensation for decades of silence. "She wants us to publicly acknowledge Marcus's true parentage. She wants Alessandro's contribution to the royal line to be formally recognized. And she wants financial compensation for what she calls 30 years of denied inheritance." "That's blackmail," Edward said flatly. "We can't give in to blackmail." "It's not that simple," Catherine interjected, her mind already working through the various implications. "If this information becomes public, it wouldn't just affect Prince Marcus. It would call into question the entire line of succession. It would give ammunition to Republican movements across Europe. It could destabilize the monarchy itself." The Queen returned to her chair, suddenly looking exhausted by the weight of carrying this secret for so many years. "Catherine is right. This isn't just about our family. It's about the institution itself. Millions of people believe in the monarchy, trust in its legitimacy, find comfort in its traditions. What happens to that faith when they discover that our succession is built on a lie?" James cleared his throat, his military training evident in his direct approach to the problem. Your Majesty, have we considered the possibility that this Sophia Moretti doesn't actually have proof? She might be fishing for information, hoping we'll confirm her suspicions. I've considered that, the Queen replied. But the letter contains details that only someone with access to very private information would know. She mentions specific dates, locations, even the name of the chapel where Alessandro and I, where we first. Queen Isabella's voice trailed off, but Catherine understood. The romance between the Queen and the Italian diplomat had been real, passionate, and documented in ways that could now be used against the royal family. What about Prince Marcus? Catherine asked gently. Does he know anything about this? Nothing, the Queen said firmly. Marcus has always believed that Alexander is his biological father. He has no reason to suspect otherwise. And I had hoped he would never need to know. Edward stopped pacing and turned to face his mother. You're going to have to tell him, aren't you? If this woman goes public, he'll find out along with the rest of the world. The thought of her eldest son learning such a devastating truth from newspaper headlines, rather than from her own lips, caused Queen Isabella visible pain. Marcus was a good man, devoted to his duty and his family. He had spent his entire life preparing to be king, believing in his divine right to rule. How could she explain that his entire identity was built on a foundation of carefully constructed lies? There's something else, the Queen said, reaching for another document from her desk drawer. This morning, before you arrived, I received a call from Prime Minister Hamilton. He's heard rumors about a potential scandal involving the royal family. He's requesting a private meeting to discuss matters of state security. Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. If the Prime Minister was already aware of potential problems, it meant that the secret was spreading beyond their control. Government officials, opposition leaders, foreign intelligence services, any number of people might soon know about the royal family's vulnerability. How much time do we have? Catherine asked. According to Sophia Moretti's letter, she's giving us 1 week to respond to her demands before she takes her information to the international press. That gives us 6 days to decide how to handle this situation. The room fell silent again as each person grappled with the magnitude of the crisis they faced. Catherine thought about the documents hidden in her apartment, evidence that could either support or contradict whatever claims Sophia Moretti intended to make. She realized that she might hold pieces of a puzzle that could determine the fate of the monarchy. Your Majesty, Catherine said carefully, while conducting research in the royal archives, I discovered some documents that might be related to this situation. Letters, photographs, legal papers from the early 90s. Queen Isabella's eyes sharpened with interest and concern. What kind of documents? Correspondence between yourself and someone with the initials AM. Photographs of private meetings. Legal papers that mention arrangements and agreements. I wasn't sure what they meant at the time, but now you found Alessandro's letters, the Queen said quietly. I thought I had destroyed all evidence of our correspondence. They were hidden behind other books in the genealogy section. It looked like someone had deliberately concealed them. James stepped forward, his protective instincts activated by this new revelation. Your Majesty, if Lady Blackwood could find these documents, others might be able to find them as well. We need to secure the archives immediately. Agreed, the Queen said. Catherine, I need you to retrieve those documents and bring them here. We need to know exactly what evidence exists and who else might have access to it. As Catherine nodded her agreement, a soft knock at the door interrupted their urgent conference. A young palace aide entered carrying a silver tray with the morning's official correspondence. Forgive the interruption, Your Majesty, the aide said, setting the tray on a side table. But there's an urgent message from the Spanish embassy. They're requesting an immediate audience with Your Majesty regarding a matter they describe as highly sensitive and time-critical. Catherine exchanged glances with the Queen. Could the Spanish government somehow be involved in this crisis? Or was this simply an unfortunate coincidence of timing? Tell the Spanish ambassador that I will see him this afternoon, the Queen replied. And please ensure that our conversation remains confidential. After the aide left, Edward resumed his pacing with renewed agitation. This is spiraling out of control. We have Sophia Moretti threatening exposure, The Prime Minister asking questions, the Spanish embassy requesting urgent meetings. How many other people know about this secret? I've been asking myself the same question for 30 years, the Queen admitted. Alessandro promised that he would never reveal the truth, but he's been dead for 5 years. His daughter might have found evidence among his personal effects, or someone else entirely might have uncovered the connection through their own investigation. Catherine's mind was working furiously, trying to piece together the various threads of the conspiracy. Your Majesty, what if we approach this situation differently? Instead of simply reacting to threats and demands, what if we took control of the narrative? What do you mean? The Queen asked. Well, we know that the truth will eventually come out. Too many people seem to have pieces of the puzzle for us to contain it indefinitely. But we could choose how and when to reveal it. We could frame it as a story of love, sacrifice, and devotion to duty, rather than allowing it to be presented as a scandal. Edward scoffed at the suggestion. You want us to voluntarily destroy the monarchy? I want us to save it, Catherine replied firmly. Public attitudes toward the royal family have evolved significantly over the past decade. People are more forgiving of human weaknesses than they once were. If we present this as a story of a young queen who made difficult choices for love and country, who raised a son with devotion regardless of his biological parentage, who built a stable and prosperous kingdom through wise leadership, we might find more support than we expect. Queen Isabella considered this perspective carefully. You're suggesting we control the revelation rather than allowing others to control it for us. Exactly. And we emphasize that Prince Marcus has been raised as a true prince, that he has dedicated his life to serving Astoria, that his legitimacy comes not just from bloodline but from character and commitment. James nodded slowly, seeing the strategic wisdom in Catherine's approach. It would also prevent Sophia Moretti from profiting from blackmail. If we reveal the truth ourselves, her threats lose their power. But it would still fundamentally change everything, Edward pointed out. Marcus would have to abdicate, wouldn't he? I would become heir to the throne instead. The weight of this realization settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Edward had never expected to rule Astoria. He had lived his entire life as the spare heir, free to pursue his own interests without the crushing responsibility of kingship. The prospect of suddenly becoming crown prince clearly terrified him. Not necessarily, Catherine said thoughtfully. Succession laws have been changed before to address unusual circumstances. Parliament might be willing to pass legislation confirming Marcus's right to the throne based on his upbringing and preparation rather than strict bloodline succession. Queen Isabella stood and walked to the fireplace, staring into the cold grate as if seeking wisdom from the ashes of last night's fire. 30 years ago, I thought I was choosing the path that would cause the least harm to the most people. I believed that keeping this secret would protect Marcus, protect the monarchy, protect our kingdom's stability. Now I wonder if my silence has only made everything worse. You made the best decision you could with the information you had at the time, Catherine said gently. No one could have predicted how this situation would evolve. But now I have to live with the consequences, the Queen replied. And more importantly, Marcus has to live with them. He's going to learn that his entire life has been built on a lie that I created and maintained. How do I face my son with that truth? The emotional weight of the Queen's dilemma was evident in every line of her body. This wasn't just a political crisis or a constitutional challenge. It was a mother's anguish over the pain she was about to cause her child. Your Majesty, James said quietly, whatever you decide to do, you won't face this alone. The palace security team is prepared to handle whatever media attention this situation generates, and I can assure you that Prince Marcus will have our complete protection and support. Catherine felt a sudden surge of determination. She had served this family loyally for over a decade, through celebrations and crises, triumphs and tragedies. She wasn't going to abandon them now when they needed her most. I'll retrieve the documents from the archives immediately, she said, and I'll begin preparing a comprehensive analysis of our options. We need to understand exactly what evidence exists, what claims Sophia Moretti can substantiate, and what our legal and political alternatives are. The Queen turned back to face the room, her expression showing a resolve that had carried her through 4 decades of royal service. Catherine, I want you to arrange a private meeting with our most trusted legal advisors, Edward, you'll need to coordinate with James on security preparations. And I need to decide how to tell Marcus about his true parentage before someone else does it for me. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, transforming the blue drawing room from a shadowy sanctuary into a bright space filled with determination, 3 people prepared to embark on a mission that would either save or destroy the monarchy they had devoted their lives to serving. The secret that had been buried for 30 years was finally clawing its way to the surface, bringing with it consequences that none of them could fully predict. But they would face those consequences together, as a team united by loyalty, love, and an unwavering commitment to protecting the crown, even if it meant sacrificing everything they had believed to be true about the royal family they served. 3 days had passed since the devastating revelation in the blue drawing room, and the palace had taken on the atmosphere of a fortress under siege. Catherine had barely slept, spending her nights poring over documents and her days coordinating what had become the most delicate crisis management operation in Astorian history. The documents she had retrieved from the archives painted a picture that was both more complex and more damaging than anyone had initially realized. Alessandro Moretti hadn't just been a casual romantic interest. He had been a sophisticated intelligence operative, working for multiple European governments. The photographs showed not just intimate moments between lovers, but what appeared to be the exchange of classified diplomatic information. Catherine sat in her private office, surrounded by manila folders and legal briefs, when her secure telephone rang. The caller identification showed only a number she didn't recognize, but given the circumstances, she answered immediately. Lady Blackwood. This is Sophia Moretti. The voice carried a slight Italian accent and a confidence that made Catherine's blood run cold. I believe we need to speak. Miss Moretti, any communication regarding this matter should go through proper diplomatic channels. Please don't insult my intelligence, Sophia interrupted. We both know this situation is far beyond diplomatic protocol. I'm calling because I want to meet with you personally, today. Before this matter escalates further, Catherine glanced at the clock on her desk. It was already past noon, and she was scheduled to brief the Queen on the legal analysis at 3 o'clock. I'm afraid that won't be possible. Lady Blackwood, let me be very clear about something. The documents in my possession don't just reveal the identity of Prince Marcus's biological father, they also contain evidence of activities that could be interpreted as treason, activities that you, as the Queen's private secretary, might be considered complicit in covering up. The threat was delivered with such casual precision that Catherine felt her hands begin to tremblate. Sophia Moretti wasn't just seeking recognition and money. She was playing a much more dangerous game. What do you want? Catherine asked quietly. I want to meet you at the Cathedral of St. Augustine at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Come alone and bring the documents you've been gathering from the royal archives. It's time we had an honest conversation about what my father really was and what your royal family really did. The line went dead, leaving Catherine staring at the phone in her hand and trying to process the magnitude of what she had just heard. Treason. The word echoed in her mind like a death sentence. What had Queen Isabella really been involved in 30 years ago? Catherine immediately contacted James Whitfield through the palace's secure communication system. Within minutes, he was standing in her office, his expression grim as she related the conversation with Sophia Moretti. You're not going to that meeting, James said flatly. It's obviously a trap of some kind. But what if she's telling the truth about the treason allegations? What if there's more to this story than the Queen has told us? James studied Catherine's face for a long moment, recognizing the doubt and fear that had taken root in her mind. You think Queen Isabella lied to us about the nature of her relationship with Alessandro Moretti? I think she told us what she thought we needed to know to help her manage this crisis. But if Alessandro was involved in intelligence operations, if there was money changing hands, or information being passed, James, we could be looking at charges that go far beyond a royal scandal. Before James could respond, Catherine's office door burst open without any preliminary knock. Prince Marcus strode into the room, his face flushed with anger and his usually impeccable appearance disheveled. At 34, the crown prince typically carried himself with the calm dignity expected of a future king. Today, however, he looked like a man whose entire world had just collapsed. Where is she? Marcus demanded, his voice carrying a rage that Catherine had never heard before. "Where is my mother?" Catherine and James exchanged glances, both realizing that somehow Prince Marcus had learned about his true parentage. The carefully planned revelation that Queen Isabella had been preparing for was no longer an option. "Your Highness," Catherine began carefully, "perhaps we should—"
Don't!
Marcus held up a hand to stop her words. "Don't give me diplomatic double-talk or royal protocol. I've just received the most enlightening phone call of my life from a woman named Sophia Moretti, who was kind enough to inform me that my entire existence is a lie." Catherine felt her heart sink. Sophia had contacted Prince Marcus directly, bypassing all their careful preparations and delivering the devastating news in the cruelest possible way. "She sent me photographs," Marcus continued, his voice becoming quieter but no less intense. "Photographs of my mother with a man I've never seen before. Love letters discussing their beautiful son and plans for his future. Legal documents suggesting that money changed hands to ensure that certain birth records reflected convenient rather than accurate information." Marcus walked to the window and stared out at the palace grounds where he had played as a child, believing himself to be a true prince of Astoria. 34 years of my life, dedicated to preparing for a throne that was never rightfully mine. 34 years of believing that duty and bloodline made me worthy of a crown that I have no legitimate claim to wear. James stepped forward, his protective instincts warring with his uncertainty about how to handle this unprecedented situation. "Your Highness, regardless of biology, you are and always have been a prince of this realm. Your dedication, your character, your service to the people, none of that has changed. Hasn't it?" Marcus turned from the window, and Catherine could see tears glittering in his eyes. "How do I stand before Parliament and claim divine right when my very existence mocks the principles of hereditary succession? How do I ask our people to bow before a bastard whose mother's lies have corrupted the monarchy itself?" The harsh words hung in the air like physical blows. Catherine had never heard Prince Marcus speak with such bitterness, and she realized that Sophia Moretti's cruel revelation had not just shattered his identity, it had destroyed his faith in everything he had been raised to believe. "Your Highness," Catherine said gently, "there are legal precedents for situations like this. Parliament has the authority to modify succession laws, especially when the circumstances involve the welfare of the realm." "Legal precedents?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Catherine, I appreciate your loyalty, but we're not talking about adjusting inheritance laws to accommodate a younger son or an adopted heir. We're talking about the fundamental deception that has undermined the legitimacy of the crown itself." Before anyone could respond, Queen Isabella herself appeared in the doorway. She looked as though she had aged a decade in the past few days, her usual regal bearing replaced by the posture of a woman carrying an unbearable burden. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I was hoping to have more time before we had this conversation." Time to construct more lies? Time to develop a more palatable version of the truth? Marcus's anger flared again, directed now at the woman who had raised him with such love and care. "Time to find a way to tell you that while your biological father may have been Alessandro Moretti, your real father has always been Alexander. Time to explain that every decision we made was motivated by love for you and love for our kingdom." Queen Isabella entered the office fully, closing the door behind her with the careful deliberation of someone who knew that the conversation ahead would change everything forever.
"Marcus, please sit down."
"There are things about that time in my life that I need to explain, things that go beyond the question of your parentage." As Prince Marcus reluctantly took a seat, Catherine noticed that the Queen's hands were trembling slightly. Whatever revelation was coming next, it was clearly difficult for her to share. "Alessandro Moretti was not just a cultural attaché," Queen Isabella began. "He was an intelligence operative working for the Italian government, and through them, for NATO. His assignment to our court was part of a larger operation designed to strengthen Western European cooperation during a particularly tense period of the Cold War." Catherine felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. The legal documents she had found, the references to arrangements and agreements. They hadn't been about hiding an affair. They had been about something much more complex and potentially much more dangerous. "I knew what he was," the Queen continued. Our intelligence services briefed me on his true role before he ever arrived at court. But what they didn't expect, what none of us expected, was that we would fall in love. Marcus stared at his mother with a mixture of confusion and growing dread. You're saying that your relationship with this man was part of some kind of espionage operation? Not exactly. The relationship was real, Marcus. But the circumstances under which it developed were complicated. Alessandro was tasked with building close relationships with key members of European royal families. I was tasked with cooperating with his mission in order to demonstrate Astoria's commitment to NATO intelligence sharing. The implications of this revelation hit Catherine like a physical blow. If Queen Isabella had been working with foreign intelligence services, if money had changed hands, if classified information had been shared outside normal diplomatic channels, the charges of treason that Sophia Moretti had hinted at might not be baseless threats. Jesus Christ, Marcus whispered, apparently coming to the same conclusion. Mother, you're describing acts that could be considered collaboration with foreign powers. In some interpretations, that could be treason, Queen Isabella finished quietly. Yes, I'm aware of the potential charges. I've been aware of them for 30 years. James Whitfield had remained silent throughout this exchange, but Catherine could see his mind working through the security implications of what they had just learned. A queen who had collaborated with foreign intelligence, a crown prince whose legitimacy was questionable, and now a woman threatening to expose everything. It was a recipe for the complete destruction of the monarchy.
Your Majesty, James said carefully, how many people knew about these intelligence arrangements? Very few. Alessandro's handler in Italian intelligence, my contact at our own security services, and Prime Minister Hamilton's predecessor.
All of them are dead now except Hamilton, and he wasn't directly involved at the time. Catherine's secure phone rang again, interrupting the tense conversation. She glanced at the caller identification and felt her stomach lurch when she saw Sophia Moretti's number. Answer it, Queen Isabella instructed, but put it on speaker. I think we all need to hear what Miss Moretti has to say. Catherine activated the speakerphone function and answered the call. Lady Blackwood. I assume by now you've had some illuminating conversations about my father's true role in your royal drama. Sophia's voice filled the office, carrying in confidence that made everyone present feel exposed and vulnerable. Miss Moretti, Queen Isabella said, taking control of the conversation. This is Queen Isabella. I understand you wish to discuss matters related to Alessandro. Perhaps it's time we spoke directly. Your Majesty. Sophia's tone carried a mock respect that bordered on insolence. How gracious of you to finally acknowledge my existence. I was beginning to think you preferred to conduct all your business through intermediaries and cover-ups. What is it you want? The Queen asked bluntly. It's about history. What I want is very simple. I want recognition that my father was more than just a casual lover who got lucky with a lonely queen. I want acknowledgement that he was a sophisticated operative who risked his life and his career for operations that your government specifically requested and approved. Marcus looked up sharply. What do you mean, specifically requested? Oh, you poor naive prince. Sophia's laughter carried a cruelty that made Catherine wince. Did you really think your mother was some innocent victim of romantic manipulation? She knew exactly who my father was and exactly what her cooperation would accomplish. She actively participated in intelligence operations that included passing classified information to foreign governments. That's not true, Queen Isabella said firmly. But Catherine noticed that her denial lacked the conviction it should have carried. Isn't it? Then, perhaps you'd like to explain the bank records I've found showing payments from NATO intelligence funds to accounts controlled by the Astorian royal household. Perhaps you'd like to discuss the classified defense documents that were photographed during your romantic meetings with my father and subsequently passed to his handlers. The room fell into a silence so complete that Catherine could hear the distant sound of traffic beyond the palace gates. Each revelation from Sophia Moretti was stripping away another layer of the careful fiction that had protected the royal family for 3 decades. Miss Moretti, Catherine said, finding her voice despite the magnitude of what they were facing. What exactly are you proposing? What would satisfy your demands? I'm proposing that the royal family finally tell the truth about my father's service and sacrifice. I want a public acknowledgement that Prince Marcus is Alessandro Moretti's son, and I want compensation for 30 years of denial and cover-up. And if we refuse? Marcus asked. If you refuse, I will release all the documents I possess to every major news organization in Europe. Your family's involvement in intelligence operations will become public knowledge. The questions about treason and collaboration will be raised in Parliament and in international courts, and Prince Marcus will be revealed as an illegitimate heir whose entire claim to the throne is based on decades of carefully maintained lies. Queen Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to summon the strength to face the consequences of decisions made so many years ago. When she opened them again, Catherine saw something that frightened her. The look of a woman who had finally realized that there might be no way out of the trap she had constructed. Ms. Pabacelli. Moretti, the Queen said quietly. You're asking me to destroy everything I've spent my life building in order to satisfy your need for revenge against circumstances that none of us could control. I'm asking you to tell the truth, Your Majesty. Something your family seems to have forgotten how to do. As the phone call ended, leaving the four people in Catherine's office to stare at each other in the aftermath of Sophia's ultimatum, Catherine realized that they had moved far beyond the realm of crisis management into something approaching catastrophe. The secret that had been hidden for 30 years wasn't just about royal succession or romantic indiscretion. It was about intelligence operations, foreign collaboration, and activities that could legitimately be interpreted as acts of treason. And now they had less than 3 days to decide whether to surrender to Sophia Moretti's demands or face the complete destruction of the monarchy they had devoted their lives to protecting. The final 24 hours of Sophia Moretti's ultimatum had arrived with the weight of inevitability. Catherine stood in the palace's war room, a secure conference chamber that had been hastily converted into a crisis management center. Maps of the kingdom covered one wall, while the opposite wall displayed television screens showing news broadcasts from around the world, all waiting for the story that could reshape European monarchy forever. The past 2 days had brought revelations that made Sophia's original demands seem almost quaint by comparison. Parliamentary intelligence committees had been secretly convened. Foreign intelligence services had begun reaching out through back channels. Most alarming of all, Prime Minister Hamilton had requested an emergency session with constitutional scholars to discuss the theoretical process for removing a monarch from the throne. The Spanish ambassador was quite direct, Catherine reported to the assembled group. His government has evidence of the intelligence sharing arrangements from the 90s. They're prepared to support our version of events, but only if we handle this situation in a way that doesn't damage broader NATO relationships. Queen Isabella, seated at the head of the conference table, looked as though she had not slept in days. Beside her, Prince Marcus had regained some of his composure, though Catherine could see the fundamental change that had occurred in his understanding of himself and his role. What exactly are they offering? James asked. He had spent the past 48 hours coordinating with security services across Europe, and his usually imperturbable demeanor showed signs of strain. Official acknowledgement that the intelligence operations were legitimate and authorized, Catherine replied. Documentation proving that Queen Isabella's cooperation was requested by NATO Command and approved by Parliament's Security Committee. In essence, they're offering to transform the treason narrative into a story of patriotic service. Prince Edward, who had remained largely silent during the crisis, finally spoke up, and in exchange, they want assurance that Sophia Moretti's documents will be handled through proper intelligence channels rather than released to the press. They want this story contained before it damages other ongoing operations. The Queen stirred in her chair, focusing on Catherine with the sharp attention that had made her such an effective ruler for 4 decades. What you're describing sounds very much like another cover-up. How is that different from what we've been doing for the past 30 years? Because this time, we control the narrative, Catherine replied. Instead of hiding from the truth, we present it in a context that emphasizes service, sacrifice, and duty, rather than deception and scandal. Marcus had been studying a legal brief prepared by the kingdom's constitutional experts. Now he looked up with an expression that surprised Catherine. It was thoughtful rather than anguished, determined rather than defeated. I've made a decision, he announced, his voice carrying the authority that had been bred into him since birth. I'm going to abdicate. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Queen Isabella's face went white, while Edward looked as though he had been struck. Even James, trained to maintain composure in any situation, couldn't hide his shock. Marcus, the Queen said quietly, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Marcus stood and walked to the window, much as his mother had done several days earlier when this crisis began. Not because I'm ashamed of my parentage, or because I believe the lies that have been told about our family, but because I believe the monarchy is bigger than any individual, including me. He turned back to face the room, and Catherine saw that he had found a kind of peace in his decision. If I remain as heir to the throne, every moment of my future reign will be overshadowed by questions about legitimacy. Every policy I support, every decision I make, every speech I give, will be analyzed through the lens of whether a bastard has the right to rule. That's not fair to our people, and it's not fair to the institution. Edward had gone very pale. Marcus, you're talking about making me the crown prince. I'm not prepared for that kind of responsibility. Answer. You'll learn, Marcus replied with a slight smile, the same way I learned, the same way every heir has learned throughout history, and you'll have the advantage of being unquestionably legitimate. Queen Isabella rose from her chair and moved to stand beside her eldest son. Marcus, if you abdicate, you're allowing Sophia Moretti to achieve exactly what she wants. You're letting blackmail succeed.
No, Mother.
If I abdicate voluntarily, on my own terms, with my own statement about why I'm making this choice, then I'm taking away her power to destroy me. She can release whatever documents she wants, but they'll be supporting a decision I've already made rather than forcing one upon me. Catherine felt a grudging admiration for the prince's political instincts. By choosing abdication rather than having it forced upon him, Marcus was maintaining dignity and control in an impossible situation. There's another consideration, Catherine added reluctantly. If Prince Marcus abdicates and the intelligence cooperation story is properly documented, it might actually strengthen the monarchy's position. It demonstrates that the royal family is willing to sacrifice personal interests for the greater good of the realm. James nodded slowly. The narrative becomes about duty and honor rather than scandal and cover-up. But I lose my son, Queen Isabella said quietly. I lose the future king I raised and trained and loved, all because of choices I made 30 years ago. Marcus took his mother's hands in his own. You're not losing me, Mother. I'll still be here, still serving the kingdom in whatever capacity I can. I just won't be wearing a crown while I do it. Before anyone could respond, Catherine's secure phone buzzed with an urgent message. She glanced at the screen and felt her blood run cold. Sophia Moretti is here, she announced. She's at the palace gates requesting an immediate audience. She says she has additional documents that change the nature of her demands. The room fell silent as everyone processed this unexpected development. Sophia had moved up her timeline, abandoning the cat-and-mouse game in favor of direct confrontation. Bring her in, Queen Isabella said after a long moment. If we're going to face this crisis, we might as well face it head-on. 20 minutes later, Sophia Moretti was escorted into the war room by James and 2 additional security officers. She was younger than Catherine had expected, perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair and intelligent eyes that bore a striking resemblance to the photographs of her father that Catherine had seen in the royal archives. Sophia carried a slim briefcase and moved with the confidence of someone who held all the cards in a high-stakes game. She nodded politely to each person in the room before taking the seat that had been prepared for her at the opposite end of the conference table from the Queen. Your Majesty, Sophia began, her English accented but precise. I appreciate you agreeing to meet with me directly. I believe we have much to discuss. Moretti, Queen Isabella replied. You've made your demands quite clear. What additional information do you believe changes our situation? Sophia opened her briefcase and withdrew a manila folder that looked remarkably similar to the ones Catherine had been working with for the past several days. What changes our situation is that I have proof that my father was murdered. The statement hung in the air like an unexploded bomb. Catherine felt her heart skip a beat as she realized that they had moved far beyond royal scandal into the realm of international crime. That's impossible, the Queen said firmly. Alessandro died of a heart attack in 1998. I attended his funeral. Did you examine the body, Your Majesty? Did you review the autopsy report? Did you investigate the circumstances that led to a healthy 45-year-old man suddenly dying of cardiac arrest? Sophia's voice carried a controlled fury that made everyone in the room take notice. She spread several documents across the conference table. These are medical records that were sealed by Italian authorities until last year. They show clear evidence of poisoning, specifically, a substance that would cause cardiac arrest while leaving minimal traces in the bloodstream. Marcus leaned forward to examine the documents. You're alleging that your father was assassinated? I'm not alleging anything, Your Highness. I'm stating a fact that I can prove. My father was killed because he knew too much about intelligence operations that powerful people wanted to keep hidden. Catherine's mind raced as she tried to process this new information. If Alessandro Moretti had been murdered, and if that murder was connected to his intelligence work, then the royal family might be dealing with something far more dangerous than blackmail or political scandal. Who do you believe killed him? James asked, his security training evident in his direct approach to the threat. That's what I intend to find out, Sophia replied. But I believe the answer lies in understanding exactly what information my father possessed and who had reasons to want him silenced. Queen Isabella had gone very still, and Catherine could see her mind working through the implications of Sophia's revelation. What are you proposing, Ms. Moretti? I'm proposing that we work together to uncover the truth about my father's death. In exchange, I'm willing to reconsider my demands regarding Prince Marcus's parentage and your intelligence cooperation. Marcus looked up from the medical documents with an expression of growing understanding. You're not really interested in destroying the monarchy, are you? You're using our crisis as leverage to investigate your father's murder. The truth about my father's death has been buried for 27 years, Sophia replied. Every official investigation has been blocked. Every inquiry has been shut down. But the royal family of Astoria has resources and connections that I could never access on my own. Catherine felt a shift in the room's dynamic. What had begun as a blackmail situation was transforming into something approaching an alliance, albeit an uneasy one. If we agree to help you investigate your father's death, the Queen asked carefully, what happens to the documents you've been threatening to release? They remain sealed until we find answers. And if those answers exonerate the royal family's involvement in intelligence operations, they might never need to see the light of day. Edward had been silent throughout Sophia's presentation, but now he spoke with the practical directness that would serve him well as future king. What makes you think we can succeed where official investigations have failed? Sophia smiled for the first time since entering the room. Because unlike official investigators, you have personal stakes in uncovering the truth. My father's death is connected to the secret that's been threatening your family for 30 years. Solving one mystery will likely solve the other. James leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. It's an interesting proposition. Instead of being blackmailed victims, we become investigative partners. Exactly. Sophia gathered her documents and returned them to the briefcase. I propose that we have 72 hours to make meaningful progress on understanding what really happened to Alessandro Moretti. If we can work together effectively during that time, I believe we can find a solution that serves everyone's interests. Queen Isabella looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes in turn. Catherine could see her weighing options, calculating risks, and making the kind of difficult decision that had defined her reign. Very well, Ms. Moretti, the Queen said finally. You have your 72 hours. But I want something in return. Complete transparency from you about what evidence you possess and what theories you're pursuing. No more surprises, no more midnight phone calls, no more threats against my family. Agreed. As Sophia prepared to leave, Marcus made one final statement that surprised everyone in the room. Miss Moretti, regardless of what we discover about your father's death, my decision to abdicate stands. Not because of your threats, but because I believe it's the right choice for our kingdom. Sophia paused at the door and turned back to face the crown prince. That's very noble of you, Your Highness. But you might want to reserve judgment until you learn the whole truth about who you really are and why certain people wanted my father silenced. After Sophia left, the room remained quiet for several minutes as each person processed what had just occurred. They had gone from facing a blackmail crisis to participating in a murder investigation, and Catherine suspected that the next 72 hours would bring revelations that would make everything they had learned so far seem simple by comparison. Well, the Queen said finally, with a dry humor that reminded Catherine why she had served this family so loyally for so many years. I suppose we're about to find out whether 30 years of keeping secrets has prepared us for uncovering them. As the sun set over the palace grounds, casting long shadows across the ancient stones that had witnessed centuries of royal dramas, Catherine realized that they were about to embark on a quest that would either destroy the monarchy entirely or transform it into something stronger and more honest than it had ever been before. The secret that had been buried for 3 decades was finally breaking free, but the truth it revealed might be far more complex and far more dangerous than any of them had imagined. And in 72 hours, they would discover whether their alliance with Sophia Moretti would save the crown or deliver it into the hands of forces that had been working in the shadows for nearly 30 years. The game had changed completely, but the stakes remained the same: the survival of everything they had devoted their lives to protecting.